Now to introduce our expert. James Shelby is Regional Account Executive for LaBar Oxney Insurance. James works with community associations and their management companies to place and manage their insurance programs. He works with his community association clients to make sure that their insurance program complies with their governing documents, their management agreement, and other contractual obligations. James is a licensed general agent and a licensed risk manager, and he has earned the certified insurance counselor and chartered property casualty underwriter designations. He is a member of the DFW chapter of CAI Magazine Committee, and he has written several articles on insurance and risk management for that publication. And with that, I will turn it over to James. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Megan, and thank you all for joining us. And I'm going to see if we can get started. And what I want to start with is quickly just explaining I'm not an attorney. The presentation's for educational purposes. I would really strongly recommend that anytime you're looking at either having someone draft a contract, review or modify a contract, you involve legal counsel. What we're going to chat about this morning is more insurance and risk situations involving contracts. And our agenda, we're going to start by discussing the importance of contracts from an insurance standpoint. Whose contract should you be using? What are some of the issues with using uninsured contractors or vendors? And a very tough question, how much insurance is enough? And then we're going to talk about what happens when you rent amenities, because that seems to be happening more and more these days. And then a little bit of information about waivers for volunteers. Now, starting out with the importance of contracts from an insurance and risk management standpoint, it starts with specifying the types of insurance and limits required of each party. And an important thing is it outlines the responsibilities of each party, not just in the insurance section. While I'm not an attorney, I will tell you that the indemnity provision, the hold harmless provision, is important from the insurance standpoint because it specifies who's responsible in the event of a claim. It clarifies which party's insurance is going to respond and offer defense, which is very important because a lot of times the biggest expense with these situations is defense cost. A lot of your contractors and vendors may talk about the fact that they have a blanket, and I like to call it automatic additional insured endorsement. These endorsements often require some sort of written agreement so that they can be activated. Now, the next question, let's talk about what happens if we use the contractors or vendors contract versus a contract that you as the association or your attorney draw up. The first issue would be, is there an indemnity or hold harmless provision that will protect the association for acts or omissions by the contractor or vendor? What you want to make sure of, if you're hiring someone either to do construction or repair, or if you're hiring a vendor to come in, if they do something that results in a claim, you want to make sure that their insurance will tackle it rather than your insurance. And does the contract specify that your association is going to be an additional insured on the contractors or vendors policies? And what additional insured means is that you have the rights of an insured in the event of a claim. And the important thing about that is getting back to defense cost. I don't know how many of you have been involved in claims with your association, but as I said, a lot of times the cost to defend a claim, to answer a lawsuit, to go through that process can be very expensive. The other thing you want to look at is, are the insurance limits that the vendor or contractor is offering in their contract, do you feel like, and does your insurance provider, does your attorney feel like they're adequate to protect the association? I guess the thing I would say is, in most cases, whoever draws up the contract is going to have it where it's more favorable to them. I'm not saying you would never want to use a contractor's or vendor's contract, but you would certainly want to have both your insurance provider, but more importantly, your attorney look at the contract, make sure that the language is favorable enough to the association where you're not going to be at risk in the event of a claim. And it also just various things like who's responsible for payment, what happens in payment disputes and things like that get more into the legal side. But it's still important to protect the association in those circumstances. Now, let's talk about using uninsured contractors or vendors, because I know a lot of times there are situations where a board member may say, I really want to use so-and-so because they're my friend, they've done a good job in the past, but maybe they're a sole proprietor and they don't carry their own insurance. Another situation we may see come up from time to time is somebody may say, hey, I want to come in and do an aerobics class for the owners, or I may want to do fitness. I may want to teach swimming lessons at the pool to owners or their children, their guests. And a lot of times those people may say, well, gee, I'm just doing this on my own. I'm not really incorporated or anything. I don't have insurance. Some of the negative things that can happen, obviously, if there's a claim, it's going to be filed against the association's insurance policies. And what we know in this day and time, if you have claims, that causes your rates to go up. And sometimes it can cause you to have coverage non-renewed. Then you have to scramble to find coverage in the marketplace. And I can tell you right now, the market currently is what we call a hard market. So even loss-free associations are going to often see rate increases. If you've had claims, it makes it more difficult to get affordable coverage. Another thing that happens in policies that are specifically designed for community associations is construction operations may be excluded. And the reason a lot of the insurance companies do this, they don't want to cover if an association is still in the development stage, they don't want to cover claims that should be covered by the developer or contractor. But I can tell you most of those exclusions don't read that way. So if someone, let's say, was doing some re-roofing, or they were building an addition to the clubhouse and something went wrong, there was a claim, there's a chance that that might be excluded from the association's policy, which means you would have to pay that claim out of either operating funds or special assessments. Another issue we see is with certain vendors. For example, if you've got people who want to have a bounce house, or they want to have a petting zoo, or they want to have a hayride in the fall or something like that, some of those types of operations are specifically excluded by the association's policy. So if you're going to hire a contractor or a vendor, whether they're insured or not, I would strongly recommend that you contact your insurance provider to find out how would your policy respond. And what happens, of course, if there's a special assessment or there was a claim that wasn't covered and all of a sudden the association's having to come up with money, the board and the property manager could potentially be sued by owners, because as a board, you have a fiduciary responsibility to the association. And this is a tough question because there's not necessarily a quote unquote right answer to this, but I think there are some things to be aware of when you're looking at, okay, we're going to have, let's say we're going to hire somebody to resurface our pool in our condominium, and the pool happens to be on the roof of the parking garage. we just have $1 million limit. And the first thing I say is $1 million just isn't what it used to be because of inflation, because of higher costs for construction, and truthfully, just because of overall inflation, uh, dealing with medical costs, other situations like that. We're seeing more settlements and judgment amounts that are in addition and above $1 million. I would certainly consider higher liability limits if you've got somebody working on a pool, like working on the gate for a pool, if they're working on playgrounds, if they're doing extensive building renovation, $1 million may not be enough. Another thing to consider is if you've got vendors that are providing inflatables, bounce houses, mechanical rides, live animals, if you're going to do a fireworks show for 4th of July or coming up for New Year's, you might want to look at higher limits because the potential, for example, with inflatables, a lot of situations where bounce houses, if there's a windy day, they don't stay on the ground and kids can be hurt. Mechanical rides, the same thing. Live animals are unpredictable. Fireworks, if you happen to burn up your neighboring association half of their land, they're not going to be very happy with you. Just a couple of claim examples I've seen over the years. There was a pool contractor and they were working on resurfacing a pool on a condominium garage. They moved a bunch of debris over that blocked the drainage. There were 10 inches of rain. It was an unusual time of year, and the parking garage literally collapsed. It looked like somebody had drilled a hole through the garage. It trapped a bunch of cars. It did extensive damage. Fortunately, there weren't any people injured or killed, but even with no bodily injury or deaths, the claim was over $14 million. Another situation, this happened in another state, but there was a teen that was sitting on a swing that should have been repaired and hadn't been properly repaired by the repair contractor. The swing broke. It hit the teen in the head and caused traumatic brain injury, and the teen's parents filed a $20 million lawsuit. We're seeing more and more, especially on serious injuries, large lawsuits are filed and large judgments are being filed. And this has to do with renting amenities. Gee, what could go wrong, right? I know there are more situations now where an owner may want to rent out the pool area for a birthday party or for an anniversary party. There may be, you may have some land that owners want to rent out to have a party, or there may be a situation where a sports team or other third party wants to rent out either land, or if you have a little soccer field or softball, baseball field. If you're going to do this, it's very important that there be a rental agreement outlining who's responsible in the event of damage or injury. And if you're renting out to an owner, they should provide evidence of their personal liability insurance. Now, you're probably not going to be able to get a certificate of insurance showing the association's additional insured from a personal liability policy, but you can ask them for a copy of their declarations page just to show that their policy's in force. And if you decide, hey, we want to have a $300,000 limit for owners, that's something that you want to talk to your insurance provider and your attorney about. But that would give evidence of that they have insurance. So if something happens, their insurance would come into play. Challenge with teams or other associations is that, let's say you've got a soccer team that wants to practice on a lot that you have, or an open area, or even a soccer field that you have on your association property. Kids get hurt. Things happen. So you want to make sure that they provide evidence of liability coverage. and that they add the association as an additional insured. One reason this is important, and this is the same thing with swim teams, we see some situations where maybe the community association has a large Olympic-sized pool, and swim teams either want to practice there, or they may even want to have a competition there. It's very important that the association make sure that the swim team has their own coverage, or if it's for a tournament or other event like that, that there's coverage in place and that the association's add as additional insured. It's not uncommon for association liability policies to exclude injuries to athletic participants. So if, let's say the swimmer is swimming in a competition and they drown or they're seriously injured, that can be a huge claim. Same thing with soccer. I can tell you I have a son who played soccer for years, and the kids get injured. They get concussions. They may step in a little hole that you didn't know about. They may injure themselves on the goalposts that the association installed. So it's very important to make sure that you have adequate protection from those teams or other organizations. A question we get a lot in a lot of cases is about waivers. Waivers if there's an event, or waivers for volunteers if you're going to have a volunteer work day. We're seeing more and more situations where community associations are having volunteers come in to clean up, and they may be doing light maintenance work. It may be cleaning up. Maybe you've got an area with an open area that trash is piled up and you want volunteers to get rid of that. You can have waivers signed, and once again, this is a legal situation. I would strongly encourage you to talk to your attorney and get their sense on a waiver. And if you want a waiver, have the attorney draw up the waiver. What I would tell you, it's not a substitute for insurance. There's still potential, even if somebody signs a waiver, that if there's an injury or damage, that there could be a claim filed. So one thing to make sure of is, does your liability coverage for your association include volunteers? In other words, if a volunteer either causes injury or is injured, would your liability policy respond if there's a lawsuit or some other coverage demand? There are volunteer accident policies that are available to pay medical expenses. There's typically a specific limit, and these types of policies will pay regardless of liability. It's really like, hey, if I'm hurt, it doesn't matter if I was hurt because the associator was liable or not. They're going to pay medical expenses up to, say, $25,000, $50,000, $100,000, whatever limit you choose. I would recommend looking at that type of situation if you're going to have a volunteer work day, because one thing it will do is, if someone is injured, it will reduce the likelihood of them suing you, which reduces the likelihood of you getting a claim on your association liability policy. And as we talked about earlier, claims cause those policies to go up, or they could cause the carrier to non-renew. There are workers' compensation policies designed specifically for community associations that will cover medical expenses for board members, committee members, and authorized volunteers. And I put the word authorized in there because it's very important to realize that there are specific criteria that the insurance company may want. They may want the volunteers to sign some kind of sign-up sheet so there's record of it. They may want in the minutes of a board meeting to say, yes, we're authorizing these people to do work for us for a community cleanup day. So it's very important to make sure, if you have one of these specific workers' compensation policies, that you understand what the insurance company is going to require, in order for volunteers to be covered. I will tell you, I've seen some situations where a board member, an ACC committee member, or a volunteer was injured, and these policies do respond. Another situation to consider with these workers' compensation policies is if you have a contractor come on board, and let's say you've done everything you were supposed to do, you have a contract with them, they provided a certificate of insurance, but unbeknownst to you, their workers' compensation policy was canceled and you weren't informed of it. They were injured, and the contractor comes back and says, well, I'm going to file a claim. I'm going to say that I'm an employee. And in those situations, these workers' compensation policies will represent your association in any kind of administrative hearings. Typically, it's not like a lawsuit. There's going to be administrative hearings that the state administers, and there will be a ruling if the person is considered an employee or not. If they're not considered an employee, your worries are over. If they are considered an employee, these workers' compensation policies would pay for lost wages and medical expenses like workers' compensation policies do from state to state. And now we're to the point of questions. I really want this to be interactive because I know I've covered some basic information, but I know there may be a lot of specific issues that you all would like to address, because I know every community association is different, and you all may have seen some things that will be of great value to the group.
Okay, we've got a few questions that have come in already. The first one is, our community has someone who performs minor repair work for us on an as-needed basis, sort of a handyman. We don't have any kind of agreement with him currently. Should we?
And I would say, and I would certainly say, talk to your attorney about it, but I would recommend having some sort of agreement with anyone who's doing work for the association. And there are a few reasons for that. Some of the things we've already talked about. The thing I just talked about, let's say this person, maybe they're retired, or they're doing work exclusively for you all, even if it's on a part-time basis. If that person is injured, they may try and claim that they're an employee, and they may claim workers' compensation type benefits. If there's a contract, the contract could specify this person is a contractor, not an employee, which would lessen the likelihood of them being successful. The other issue is, let's say they're doing work and they damage an owner's property, or they wax a floor and then somebody falls and injures themselves. You would really want a policy for that individual to come into play rather than the association's policy. And I've seen situations where the association even agreed, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to have a contract with this person. We're going to pay them an additional amount to cover the cost of their liability insurance, but they're going to have their own liability insurance. So there's that layer of protection between the party who's suing and the association.
Okay. Another question, our association recently solicited bids to repair our access gates. 2 of the bids were very close, and 1 was significantly lower. The contractor with the low bid does not carry insurance. A couple of our board members want to hire the low bidder. How should we handle this?
And I think, once again, it's something where I would certainly recommend getting your association attorney and possibly your insurance provider involved. But as a board member, as I said, and I've been a board member for various nonprofit associations, not community associations, but other types of associations. As a board member, you have a fiduciary duty. And part of that fiduciary duty is looking at what's the risk to the association. Let's say that person who had the low bid doesn't repair the entry gate correctly, and there's somebody's driving their brand new Mercedes, the gate closes on it and does $50,000 worth of damage. Where's that money going to come from? Yes, it could come from the association's insurance, but then you have a $50,000 claim. If the association's insurance denied it, then you're talking about the money coming out of the association's operating funds or reserve funds. So I would recommend anyone that you have performing services for, you have a contract. It doesn't have to be 20 pages long, but just something that spells out this is what is going to happen, and any contractor should have insurance. I mean, that's, to me, that's part of sound business practices, dealing with responsible contractors. And if the contractor doesn't have insurance, there's also the potential, what else may they be cutting corners on?
Okay, another one just came in. If we use our gazebo area for a community function, how does that work with insurance?
Okay, if you're using a common area and it's a function that's sponsored by the association's liability insurance would come into play. As long as it's something that you're doing as the association itself, that's one of the things that is expected to be covered by the association's insurance policies.
Okay. Our community is planning an event in December with a food truck, a Christmas train, and a bounce house. One of the vendors just provided an invoice and does not want to sign a contract or provide an insurance certificate. Can we buy a special event policy to cover all the vendors?
And what I would tell you is special event policies are available, and we sell them pretty frequently to associations that are doing special events like the one that was described. What we're seeing more and more is those insurance companies have gotten smart, which means in my mind they've paid claims. So they're saying, hey, we're not going to provide coverage unless all of the vendors have signed an agreement with you and that they have provided their own insurance and they're naming the association as additional insured. Essentially, what they want to be is they want to be they only want to come and play after the vendor's insurance comes into play. So yes, there are policies available, there are special events policies, but if you've got a vendor that doesn't have their own insurance, it may be difficult to find that coverage in the marketplace.
Okay, great. Are insurance recommendations the same for lessees who are not unit owners of units as they are for owners who rent amenity spaces? Is there any difference if the spaces are not rented but merely reserved for use by unit owners and lessees?
Okay, and if you're talking about, I'm assuming whether it's a HOA or a condominium association that someone is leasing the home or leasing the unit, they should still have a renter's insurance policy. So they would still need to, if you've got a requirement in your governing documents, or if you made this a rule, they would need to follow the same types of rules that the owners would follow. Even if someone is reserving the space and it's not technically a rental, it's just a reservation, I would still recommend having some sort of agreement, because whether you rent it for money or you're just saying we're going to allow owners to reserve this space, but they need to sign some type of agreement outline, because that's more outlining the responsibilities of the owner versus the association and whose insurance would come into play. So whether you're charging money for it or it's just a reservation, I would recommend having some sort of agreement that spells out the various parties' responsibilities and has some sort of insurance requirement.
Okay. If a volunteer travels in an auto to discuss a project with a vendor, does the volunteer insurance cover the volunteer in case of an auto accident?
Okay, there's a couple of answers to that question. The volunteer accident policy is not necessarily location specific. If it's purchased for a specific reason, and like the workers' compensation policy I talked about, if the volunteer is performing business for the association, and it's a board member, a committee member, authorized volunteer, they will be covered as long as they're performing duties on behalf of the association, whether it was on premises or off premises. That would cover injury to the volunteer. The other issue might be what's the liability exposure to the association if the accident injured someone else or damaged another vehicle. We recommend that community associations purchase what's called hired non-owned auto liability insurance, because that protects the association if someone who's driving their own vehicle on association business has an at-fault accident. So I hope that doesn't over-answer the question, but to answer the question, the volunteer accident policy or the workers' compensation policy that covers volunteers would cover the person as long as they're performing the duties on behalf of the association.
Okay. We've got a question. Will insurance rates ever go down? What's your prediction?
I wish I had that crystal ball. I'd buy a lottery ticket today if I had that kind of crystal ball. I think the driving forces, I don't know how quickly they'll go down. We are a cyclical industry, so I think eventually they'll go down. I think some things are going to have to happen. I think inflation is going to have to cool because that is a driving factor. Other things that are going to happen is I think there are going to have to be some creative solutions to catastrophe type claims, because a lot of what drives the property insurance world here in North Texas is hail losses. So can we make roofs more resilient? Can we come up with alternatives to traditional insurance to protect the association in the event of a claim, but also to keep the insurance companies from writing multi-million-dollar checks on a regular basis. I don't see relief in the very near term future, but we are a cyclical business, so I suspect that at some point in the future, as inflation cools and as we come up with some creative solutions, that's really what's going to take for the insurance market to level off and then start becoming more of a soft market.
Okay. Just in, what type of insurance coverage protects the HOA association from accounting or banking fraud?
Okay, that would be a crime policy, and what we recommend is purchasing a policy that will cover employee dishonesty, but that will define employees as also board members or volunteers that may have access to financial records, checking accounts, etc. And it would also cover the management company. Now, the management company should also provide their own employee dishonesty policy. You may also want to purchase insurance, and it can be under that same crime policy, to cover if there's, let's say, fraud by a third party, where a third party comes in and they do a funds transfer fraud, embezzlement, or where they go in and they find your check stock and they write checks on your behalf, or there are even situations, obviously, where now we have credit and debit card fraud. Those are all available in the marketplace, but you would want to talk to your insurance provider about crime coverage.
Okay. I think that's all of our questions. We'll give it a minute here to see if anything else comes through. Okay, it doesn't look like we have any other questions. Thank you very much, James. That was very informative. Really appreciate your participation today. If anybody has any additional questions, feel free to email them and we will be happy to get back to you. Oh, let's see, we've got one more question that just came in. Thank you for the webinar. Thank you, Mitch. And with that, we will close. Thanks so much.
Thank you.